Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the point of sale application. In this exclusive training, I'm going to show you how we create an amazing point of sale application. We're going to start from the beginning, from a blank sheet. So every step, every line of code, and every field and format, I'm going to show you how you can create an amazing application right before your eyes. So let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining us today. I've got a really fantastic training for you today, something I've never created, a point of sale application. I'm going to walk you through it. I hope you'll stay. It's going to be a little bit of a training, not tons of code, more formatting. We've got a lot to cover today. I'm really excited about this. Before we get started, I want to make sure you know that you can get this application downloaded using the links in the description below, absolutely free. In fact, this one's going to be a zip. I'm going to include some pictures for you, maybe some barcode fonts, the application, so you won't want to miss it. Make sure you download it. And also, especially with these live trainings, I tend to make, maybe there's a few updates or a few issues with it live, so you always want to download my version and compare your version with my version. I always appreciate when you try to program these yourself, and I think it's really fantastic, so you always want to compare those. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so using the button down below, and make sure you click the notifications bell. I create these trainings each and every Tuesday absolutely free for you, and I love to see what you can create, so I always appreciate that. If you do like these trainings and you love Excel and you want to turn your passion into profits, I have just the course for you. In fact, our Excel for Freelancers mentorship program is going to teach you just how to do that. Turn your passion into profits. In fact, in this program, we're going to go from concept to cash and everything in between in weekly videos, while I create an amazing accounting application right along with you. And I hope you'll create your own applications right along. These are weekly subscription based. It's an amazing course, and I hope you'll jump on the bandwagon. Tons and tons of students are loving it and learning how to create and sell their own applications. All right, great. Glad we got that out of the way. And also, if you do like these applications and you want over 100 of them, I do have a 100 workbook pack, so I'll keep that in mind. I'll put the links down below. If you want to get 100 of them, it's just $37. Okay, thanks. Great. Let's get started. As you can see, I've got a blank sheet here. Nothing on here. I've got sheet number 1 called POS. That's going to be our point of sale application. I've got another sheet just with a few item names, and these are linked to pictures. I've got some pictures for each of these. It's just simply item ID, item name, item description, price, and an image. This image is linked to a folder, and inside that folder I've got some images here. As you can see right here, I've just got some pictures, and they're linked actually on my desktop. I've got a folder of the same pictures on my desktop. I'm going to include these pictures so you can play around with it as well, so you can work. You don't have to create your own pictures. That way you can try out and add features and customize yourself. So I'll include these in this little table so that you have everything you need. All you'll want to do in your own applications is make sure that you update these links with your actual filings, right? These are to mine, so that's not going to help you, these image links. So I want to make sure you get yours. And then, of course, the sheet 3 is going to be where we're going to put our sales. I want to track all the sales that we've done previously. That's important as we create this. So sheet 3 is going to handle this. So again, this is going to be our main application where we're going to enter and print receipts, items here, and then sales here. So let's get started. As always, what I like to do is I like to save the first 2 columns for admin, and we hide those columns. So let's color those a little bit differently. And while we go into the home, I'm just going to color those gray. I always want to hide those columns and keep those for admin. So that's a great way to do that. Next up, I want to give it a name. Let's just call it something like point of sale. And that way we can color the columns, let's say all the way through O, and then we're going to save some room for receipt. So we're going to format these cells, give it a fade, so maybe a fill fade. I'll use something a little bit different than I usually do. If you're familiar with these, then it'll just take a minute to watch. Sometimes repetition helps, so even seeing it over and over again helps. And then I'm going to color the one below a little bit less of a fade. And then we'll give that a fill effects of a little bit lighter of a turquoise color. So we'll go to here. And then I want that fading into the background, the main background color. So let's color that. I'm also going to clear out some of those rows with some for the receipt. So not everything's going to be colored because I want the background of the receipt. And the background is, let's say, K through N. K through N. I want this to be our receipt. So I'm going to actually make that white. And so we'll color that white because I want our receipt to print out, and then we can extend this column. So basically the idea is to have our receipt here and our form here, and then this column will just be for spacers so that you can extend this off a little bit. So that way your screen's all the same color. So we'll give it a font, a larger font, and I'll merge and center it maybe to J. And so we have a little bit of a larger font, and we'll increase the font maybe to about 32 or something like that. It's something nice and big. Oh, that's too much. Okay. All right, that should be good. Let's go with 32. I like that a little bit better. And we can then add some icons in here and add some shapes. What I want to do also is I want to add an item name. Let's say in 3, item name. I want to put that in there because that's important. And then I'll put the description down here. And then I want a picture also, so I want to put in that picture. So we also have, I also want to know the subtotal of that. So let's put that subtotal here because I want to keep track of it. And then the tax, I want to put that there. Total, I want to keep that. Pay type, I want to know what type they're paying with. And payment. And then change also. I want to keep track of the change as well. Okay, actually I want them all in the same column, so just copy those over and paste them here. I want them all in the same column. Then I'm going to then have a space for each one of these, so we'll block those out and then keep that in mind. All right, so that's basically what I want. I want to keep track of that. So, all right, I'll put a border around that. I'm going to format those cells and put a border, let's say the same darker turquoise color, and we'll use a border, inside and out border. And I'll use this dotted line for the middle. Okay, so we've got that. We've got a total, and I'll right justify this so that we can see that. And then I want to add colons. I want consistency, so let's add colons on these here. Pay type, and then payment. We want to keep track of the payment, and then we want to keep track of the change. Really, there's only the pay type and the payment are going to be user entered. The rest are going to be calculated. So let's put these in the background as white. Okay, I want probably going to put the item description right here. So let's put a box around that. Format the cells. Again, we're going to use the same border here. Same color consistency all the way around. And then I'll put a dotted line here horizontally because I want that description to go. Let's put a solid line actually. And I'll put the dotted line here. So we want the item name. I want to give a little bit larger space for that. So I'm going to merge and center it and left justify it. I want the item name here and the item description here. So I'm going to merge and center that too. And let's give it a little bit more space for that and right justify it. Okay, so we've got the item name. We're going to put the calculated information here. And then I also want, of course, the price of the information. Let's go put that in the 6th price. We want to show the price. We want to be able to change that price as well. So we're going to put that as white. And I also want the quantity. We also want to change the quantity here. So both of these are going to have the same formats. Both of those are going to be editable. Color those white there. And we also want to make sure that they're both right justified. And then in this case, we can keep those, let's say, right justified as well. All right, so we're going to format those cells pretty much using the same borders that we have, the same border colors that we do throughout the application. And we'll use the same border, and then I want the dotted line in the middle vertically. Okay, so it's starting to come together now. Let's save our work. And I also want to scan the item. Of course, we're going to be scanning the item. That is important, so we're going to put that here. Let's just put scan item here because I want to put a little bit larger in case it's a larger number, and then left justify it. Let's put in a colon, keep it consistent. See, we like consistent here. And then right justify that and do the same thing here. So let's make this white and again put the same borders around that, formatting the cells with the border. Thanks for your patience on these while I format these, but you seem to really like to watch me create these. So based on your views, I'm going to try to do a lot more than that. All right, so we have our basic. I'm going to put the picture here. I want that a little small picture here, and I'm going to put a button set here, and then I want to put a button set here as well. The receipt information will go here, and this will be just a little spacer. All right, let's add some buttons in here. So I'm going to insert some pictures here and see what we got. I've got some saved already, so I'm just going to insert those. They're going to be bigger, so let's just bring those down to 0.3 or something manageable so that we can see those. And then we'll size them accordingly. Those are the ones that are going to go on the button, so we'll have to bring those to the top. But we have this is an icon here that I'm going to use for the entire point of sale application. So I'm going to drag this up here, make it a little bit bigger so it's obvious, and then I'm going to add more of a theme color, which would be this. So give a little bit more theme color. We can also add a little bit of a shadow on that, so we can click pictures and just add a little bit of a shadow so it kind of looks nice. Make this bold, and we can also add a little bit darker color onto this. Okay, so now it's kind of a nice, we get to see that. So we have the item name, but let's add in some buttons here because I want to make sure that we have the button so the user can actually use a touch screen, which is kind of a nice. So we're going to insert shape, and we're just going to use a square shape in here. Okay, let's give it a size, try a little bit bigger, 0.6, and maybe a width of 0.7. Okay, so that's kind of a nice size for that. We have a nice big button there, so that's going to work. And I want to give it something closer to the theme, maybe this. Okay, that looks nice. I wanted to actually give it a font, a larger font. So I want to make this button number 1. And then I want to center that, of course, and then we'll duplicate it. But obviously it's going to be a lot bigger than that. So how big should it be? Probably about, let's see, 32 maybe. Let's click the button and click 32 here. Okay, let's give it a nice button. There we go. That looks good. Nice and big. And then we're ready to duplicate that. Let's duplicate it, Control D. And then this is going to be for 2. And then we can duplicate that again. And we'll click on there, duplicate that. This will be for our number 3. Nice. And then we want also, of course, number 4. So we'll duplicate that, Control D, because I want one for each one. And let me just go ahead and do these. I'll pause the video while I create each one. You get the point. So I want to make this a little quicker. Okay, now I've created all 12 buttons here. So now that I've created all 12 buttons, I'm going to name them. And very important to name them, at least use going to be 4 letters, at least minimum 4 letters and a number. So if I were to add, let's say I wanted to do BUT1, that wouldn't work. Why wouldn't that work? Because that's a cell. So if I hit enter, it's going to go right to a cell. You see that? BUT1. So we want to make sure that we have at least 4 letters. So let's do that. BUTN1, button 1. Okay, so that's going to work just fine. And I'm going to do the same thing with each of the buttons. There's no need to watch me name each one of them. So I'm going to pause this video and just name them all button 2. So hold on a second while I do that. Okay, I've named all the buttons, at least 1 through 9. This is going to be 0. This is not going to be 0. I want this to be clear. I want to be able to clear button. So let's type that in, clear, and then we're going to have to obviously reduce the font size on this one. So let's go ahead and reduce it down to where it'll fit in the cell here. Let's drop this down here and reduce that down, scroll up. Probably, okay, that one looks good. We can go a little bit higher, and then I'm going to underline it, Control U. All right, great. So we've got our basic format buttons there now. So let's line them up. All we need to do is use our selection here, and then I'm going to line them up like this, format, and then we're going to align to the top, and then I'm going to probably bring them a little bit closer in. I've got a lot to cover here, so I want to bring them closer in here. And then also importantly, we're going to group everything together once we're set up. So there we go. That's a little bit tighter here. So we can, I've got a lot of space. I want to add buttons here too. So we're going to keep that a little bit closer together. Okay, good. So now we've got everything nice and close together, and I'm going to line the rest of these up, and there's no need for you to watch me do that because it's kind of boring. So I'll hold on a second, I'll pause it while I line everything up nicely, and then we'll create some more buttons. All right, now that I've got everything lined up, I've got a few more things. I don't want to name this button, obviously clear. This one's going to be different. It's going to have a different purpose, clear button. And I also want to add this one. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be called decimal button, because it's going to have a little bit different macro. All right, okay, excellent. We've got a few more buttons to create. I want to create some different payment types. So let's do that. Let's create some buttons. I'm gonna just duplicate one of these buttons using Control D, and I'm gonna shrink this down the width because I want to fit more in here. Okay, maybe 0.5 because I want to put 3 buttons in here the same size. And there's gonna be no text on this. But what I'm gonna do is I want to put a payment type in here. So I want actually 3 payment types. So I'm gonna duplicate this 3 times. Total of 3 buttons and move them over here because I want all 3 payment types. And then all right, we can line those up and distribute them just by selecting them, Control, and then formatting. Make sure we align the top here, and then we want to distribute them horizontally. That looks nice. All right, and then I also want to make sure the bottoms are the same as these. I want to make sure those are all consistent. So let's line up the bottoms or the tops. Either one would be fine. Okay, so we've got those. Now let's add some payment types in. The first one I'm going to do is cash. So I'm going to put that icon right here. Oh, let's bring all those to the top first. So what we're going to do is we're going to select on all of them because we created the buttons after. Bring forward, bring to the front. Okay, so now they'll be on top of the buttons, which is kind of handy. So cash, we have cash. We have a credit card here. I want to bring the credit card as a payment option, and then the check option also. So we've got those 3 options here. We can line those up nicely so that everything's grouped properly. Format and align the middle right here. Okay, so everything's lined up nicely and distributed. Align, I also want to distribute them horizontally so everything's centered. And we can group those very soon, but I want to create a payment button also on this. So let's also duplicate this one. I want a payment button. And that payment button is going to be larger, but I want the same height as this. So let's align the top. This is how you create buttons really quickly and easily. Okay, and what do we want to give the name? I want to call this payment, but we're going to have to reduce the font. So payment, and then we're going to reduce the font so that it fits, and I want it right justified because I'm going to add an icon onto that. So let's click the button itself and then lower the font here. And then I want to increase the font. Obviously, it's going to be a larger button. And I'll give this a width maybe around 1 point. That should be fine. Width, that should be okay as it is. And then we'll move that over here. And then I'll align the left here because I want to make sure everything's lined up. Align left. And then click on here. And then we're going to align the right to this button. That way everything lines up. Then I'm going to create 2 more buttons aligned to the right. Okay, good. So now we've got everything centered, and let's add in an icon for this. So we can put in an icon there. Can probably increase this font. We created that button after, so let's again move to the top, bring to the front. All right, so let's. That looks like a good. I'm going to create 2 more buttons. Control D, and then I want to bring these 2 also because we're going to add the icons. So I want to bring those to the front as well. All right, and this one I'm going to be next. NEXT because I want to go to the next record, so we'll use that. And I also want to print record. We'll increase the font here just temporarily, bring this all the way down here, and then I want this to be our print button, so we'll capitalize, and then we're going to increase the fonts on both of these buttons. So holding down the shift, I want to increase those just pretty much larger. That's pretty good, something nice and large. Okay, good. Now we're getting set. We got our buttons set, and what we want to do is we want to group these, start grouping these items. So I'm going to hold down the Control and group those, and then I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to group those. This is our shortcut for grouping, and I'm going to move this one a little bit to the left and group that because I want those always grouped. I also want to group these button sets, so I'm going to do my selection tool, and I'm going to highlight everything because I don't want it, and I'm going to group it. And importantly, right after we group it, we want to go to the properties, and we want to make sure that we don't size it. We just spent a lot of time making sure everything's set up, but we want to click move but don't size with cells. In fact, that's going to go through all of our buttons once we get set, because when we change these columns, I don't want these button sets to move, but I want to make sure that everything is set up right. So we're going to bring down and make sure those bottoms are lined up. Align the bottom. Okay, that looks pretty good, and we can bring the font. So now we've got our next button. We can group that. And we've got our print button here. We'll also want to line that up. Okay, good. Now we can bring this up a little bit more. Looking good. Now we've got our POS coming together very, very well. We're going to group all of the buttons, line them up in the middle so everything looks great, and group that, and make sure we also group this one, line them up. Everything's going to get lined up. and then group it. And make sure, of course, after we group everything's now grouped, we also want to make sure that we are moving but not sizing. That's very, very important. So we're going to go to properties, move but don't size. Okay, so we've got this named and set up. Our point of sale is coming together. We're going to put our receipt information here, and looking very good. We can align those. All right, let's get into the naming right now so we can name everything properly. So let's put this as the next button, N-E-X-T button. And this will be our print button. Everything should be pretty clear. Make sure you always name it so you know it. That way you can see it on the shapes. Print button. And there's specific, these are going to have specific names, and I'm going to show you why, because it's going to be a lot easier to create macros. I can use the same macro for each one if I use specific names, not necessarily the group, but the individual shapes. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to name this. Let's go into the selection pane. It's much easier to work from there. And you see the selection pane. What I'm going to call this is just cash. And I'm also going to assign the same name. Generally we don't, but in this case it's going to be very specific, cash. I'm going to assign the same name to that. And also I'm going to do the same thing with credit card. I'm just going to call this card, and I'm going to call this card. Now we're going to use the same name because we're going to turn this name automatically into the payment type, and we're going to do the same thing for check. Check, just so both the picture, the icon, and the button are going to have the same name. Okay, great. So we've got payment, we've got this, everything's perfect. And let's name the payment button, and then we're done. Then we can start writing some code. And I also want to payment button. Okay, so we got everything named. We're going to put our picture here. We're going to put our subtotal here. We're going to put our receipt. Let's start working on this receipt. I want this going to be merge and center, and I'll call this sales receipt. And then let's make that a little bit bold and bigger, of course. That would be good. And then I'm going to put down also want to merge and center this and the next few lines as well, because we're going to put in some information there that we want. Merge and center those, and I want to put probably the name of the store. Let's call it Fredder's Groceries, my favorite name, Groceries. And I also want to put the address 12345 Main Street, California, USA, and then probably a phone number here. All right, so next up, I also want to know the receipt number here. So I want to put that in here. Receipt number is very important because we're going to keep track of that. And then the next up, I want to know the date, also the date of the receipt and the cashier. And we'll just put in Frida Fredders, that's Fred's sister. Frida Fredders. Okay, and then the date, I want to use a long date here. Also want to merge and center these, holding down the control, merge and center, and then left justify it. And then these are going to be right justified. So we can see our receipt come to life here. Great, so what's next? Well, I'm going to skip a line, and then we want to put the information. So here I want the item, here the quantity, the price, and the total. Great, and I want to center those and then put a dotted line above that and below it. So we're going to format those cells, format, and then I'll put like a dotted line, something like this, above and below it. So it gets kind of the look of a receipt. That looks nice. And then our items will go here. So apple here would go here, the quantity 1, and then the price would be, let's just say $2.99. And then the total will be probably equal to this times this. So just to get an idea of where we're going there on that. Okay, so let's focus on the formatting now. I want to format this entire one probably as a number because we want to use generally, could be 1.5, and these are going to be price columns. So let's just format all those down there as a currency or format price. Okay, and this one looks good the way it is. I like the way it's looking now. And so all of our items are going to go here, and then I'm going to want probably things like subtotal and total down here. So I would want to put something like, at least temporarily, like total here, tax here, total would be here, paid amount, I want to know the amount they paid, and the change. So those are all important. I want to know all of those That information is going to be below the receipt. Now it's going to be dynamic, right? So we're going to put this in dynamically because we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know how many rows. So that would look good. I want that there. And then I also want something like thank you for your receipt, but it's going to be dynamic. So I want to say something like thank you, come again, and then a barcode here. Let's put those in using text because I want them centered around there. So I'm going to click shape and insert a text box here. I'm going to make it about the same size as the width of this receipt. And then I want to put in a message, so something like thank you, come again. Something like a message, and then we'll center that. No borders. I don't want any borders around that, so I just wanted it. No outline on that, so we'll just click no outline. Make that bold so we can see what it would look like. And okay, good. I like that. And I also want a barcode font here, and it's going to be based on this receipt number. So if I enter receipt number 1000, I want a barcode based on that. So let's enter another text box. In fact, let's just duplicate this one using Control D, but I'm going to change the font. In this one, it's going to be equal to whatever is going to be that receipt number here. So equal that receipt number. So that's what I want. Good. But now I want to change the font. I want a barcode font on that. Let's try code 128. Obviously, that's too small. So let's increase it a considerable amount and then increase this. All right, I like the way that looks there. Okay, so we have thank you and we have a nice barcode font here. That's a good footer message. Let's put that lower here and then we can raise it up a little bit. Nice. So we've got those two and let's make them on top of each other. And we're going to center those, format align, and I'm going to put line in the middle and I'm going to group those. Because I'm going to use those basically, but they're going to be displayed dynamically because we don't know how big this receipt's going to be. So let's group them, and always when we group, format the cells, right? Format the shape in this case, and go to properties and move but don't size. We don't want that moving. We want that saved. We may size it accordingly a little bit anyways, accordingly, just to make sure. And I'm going to give this a specific name, calling it footer group. Okay, so now we've got a footer group, and now we got this is going to be dynamic, of course, and I want to put some conditional formatting in here as well. All right, so our receipt's starting to come together. I like the way it looks so far. We've got a lot more work to do. What do we want? I want to focus on some information based on the items, what items we've selected. I also want to know when I select an item, I want to know what I've selected. So let's add in some additional information here. I want to know when the item's going to load. What I want to do is I want to select an item, and I want that item information to appear here. I want the item name, the item description, the price, and the quantity to appear here when we select it. When we enter or scan an item, I want the number that we enter to automatically enter here and then automatically add it down here. Keep adding and adding and adding. So, but I want to be able to edit existing items as well. So we need to know when the item is loading, meaning the information is coming from here and going into here. So that's important as well. I also want to keep track of the totals here. So we need to do that. So I want the item load. I also want the item row. I need to know what row the item, and that's based on the row here in the database. I also want to know the receipt row, that's the row that we've selected here. And I also, one more thing, I want to know the next receipt number, right? I want to know that because that's important. I want to understand which is the next one so we can load up so they're all unique, the numbers, and then we'll highlight those, give those a distinct look and feel so that we can see the difference. Okay, good. So we're set with that. That's all we're going to need as far as that. And let's go ahead and name some information, create some named ranges now. For the items, I want to create a dynamic named range for the item ID because we're going to need to locate that. So that's very important. So let's go into the formulas name manager and create a new, actually let's highlight this. Let's make sure we include the header, name manager, and then new. What I want to do is create an item ID, but it's going to be dynamic. So we're going to have to add offset in here. Let's copy this. We're going to use it in a moment. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to type in offset. And I want to include the header, but only because if there's no data, I want to make sure that it doesn't create an error. So we're going to include A2, but then we're going to move one column down. And then comma, count A. I want to know all the text in that whole column. Of course, I want to increase it more than 12, so we're going to go, let's say 9999, just in case we have a lot of data. And of course, since we're counting the header, we need to subtract 1, -1, comma 1, which means one column. Let's tab out and tab back in to make sure that the dancing ants cover our data, which it does. It's perfect. So I'm going to copy that entire named range using Control C, and I'm going to click OK. I also want another one for item name. So let's click New and click Item Name. I want a named range there. And then I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it. Now all I need to do is change the column. So I can change A from A to B, and then we're set. So I'm going to put this B just in 3 different places, B and then B. Again, tab out, tab back in, make sure that it's covered. Okay, we're good to go. And I want one more, new item description. We're going to follow the same procedure. In fact, we're just going to paste it in there and change A to C. That's going to quickly be able to create 3 different named ranges using offset. Tab out, tab in, make sure that it covers our data, and click OK. All right, now I've quickly created 3 different. I also want to create a named range for our receipt numbers and our sales. Our sales page is going to have, let's just call it sales history, whatever we want, that's fine. And inside that sales history, I'm going to put some information. I want to know the receipt number. So that's important. I also want to know the date that the receipt was made, the cashier, who rung it up, and then of course the item, the quantity, price, and the total. So I'm going to want all that information here. It's going to be just a basic table, so we're going to merge and send to that here, and then let's just give it a basic color. It's not so important, the formatting of this one. Okay, so, but what do I want? I want to know all the receipt numbers. So I want to make sure that I can have a dynamic name range for the receipt number. So let's do that. Let's create one more dynamic name range. Formulas, name manager, new, and we'll just call this receipt number. And of course, this is going to also use the offset. So again, we're going to say offset using the sales A2 through A, and obviously you're going to much larger numbers. So we're going to copy that, back that up. Comma 1 means one column. We don't want to start at the header. Comma, comma, count A. I want to count all of them. Again, paste it in, but make it a larger in case we have a lot. And then again, -1 because we need to exclude the header. We're only including the header, so there's no error when there's no data. Comma 1, and then close parentheses. Tab out, tab back in. Make sure that it covers. Good, so it does. All right, so we've got our named ranges now covered. So now we can add in a little bit of a formula so we understand. We see our item numbers 1001, 1002. Okay, good. Let's focus on some of these. I want to know the next receipt number. So how do we find that? Well, we just created a next receipt. Let's see if we have any sales. We have 1 and 2, but ours is going to be probably like 100. So let's put in some larger ones. Because I want a big barcode font, so I'm going to do 100. And then let's just say 1001. So our next, I want to know what the next one would be. So we can do that using if error and max equals if error. If it's an error, because if it's an error, if there's no data, we also need to set an initial receipt number. So we're going to include the max, and the max is of the receipt number. What is the maximum of that? +1. That's going to be our next increment, +1. But what if there's no data? If there's no data at all, I want to start it off at, let's just say 1000. Okay, let's take a look. Perfect, 1002. Now, as soon as I delete the data, as soon as I delete these two, it should go to 1000. So let's go back and check. Perfect, that's what I want. 1000, 1000 here. So we know our next receipt number. I want to know the selected row. If the user makes a selection change, I want to know the row, and I want to highlight that row, and I want to make sure there's data. So for example, if they click row 10, I want to highlight that. I want to know which row the user has selected. So we can add in some conditional formatting. Let's click on the first one and then go way down here just to there. And then what I'm going to do is add some conditional formatting. So go back into the home, conditional formatting, manage rules. I want to create a brand new rule and use a formula. What is that formula going to be based on? It's based on, of course, B10. So it's going to be equals B6 equals row. Open and close parentheses. Now I want to give that a specific format based on our theme. So let's go into the fill effects, and I'm going to choose this darker color here, but I want to make sure to give it a font. So I want a contrasting. So we're going to make it bold and make it white. It's going to give it a contrasting so that we know what they've selected. Apply that. make sure the form applies to, click OK. All right, so when they click here, I want that to be highlighted, and I also want to load the information. That's what's going to happen here. And I want the item name here to appear here, and I want the item description to appear here. All right, so we got the item name. How do we know? I want to know the item row based on the scanned item information. So if they enter 1001, which of course is our first item, Apple, I want to make sure, and that starts on, of course, I want to know row 3. When they enter 1001, I want to know it's row 3. We have named ranges, but they start at row 3, so we're going to need to add 2. Let me show you what that is. So equals if error. I always want to if error because I don't want to make sure. We're going to match. What are we matching? I'm going to match, look up this value 1001, and I'm going to match it based on the item ID. And I want an exact match, so that's going to be 0. And in case there's an error, I just want empty to show up. But I don't want 1, right? 1's going to show us our first row. I really want the row. So we always have to add 2 because I want to know the row, not that it's the first item. So adding 2 is going to do that. So now we get 3 for 1001, and if we change this to 1002, we are going to get 4, which is exactly what I want. All right, so we've got that, and this is going to be a true or false here because we want to know when the item loads. So now we've got it. That's all we need for that. I want to know the item description. We can use that based, of course, on this name. So we can use an index for that. Equals index. What are we indexing? I'm going to index the item description, which we have here. What are we going to base it on? Base it on the row. We know the row is going to be here. We can also base it on the name, the match. Let's match the name so that way, no matter what we select, we can know match. We're going to look up the name, and we're going to base it on the item name here, item name, and then we want an exact match. So that's going to get us the row. In this case, we don't have to add because we're indexing the same item column. Comma 1 is the column, and let's just take a look at that. Okay, Granny Smith apples. Now that creates perfect. It looks just right. That's just the way I want it. We got apple, and if we change this to strawberry, handpicks from, okay, great. So we've got the description for strawberries and based on the name. That's what I want. Why do I want that? Because whether they enter this or whether they select it, I want the description to show up here. Perfect. And the price is going to be dynamic based on whether they enter here from the database or based on whether they select here the price. So there's going to be 2 different prices. The price, if they enter here, the price is going to come from right here. But if they select on an existing item, the price is going to come from here, and that VBA will handle that. Let's focus on the subtotal now because we want to make sure we get the totals right and the taxes all right. So that's going to be helpful. And the subtotal is basically going to be a formula based on all of what's in this column. But I can't just total what's in this column because I also have the subtotal, the tax. So I have to use a sum if, and it's going to have to be based on something. Sum if there's a value in column K, then we can sum it. So let's use sum if for that. Equals sum if, and what is it? We're going to sum if, and it's going to be based on this. Sum if K, and we'll use a large number. I want to make sure that that contains a value before we sum. So what is that sum? Then we're going to use quotes does not equal quotes. So that's going to mean as long as it's not blank, what that means. And what's the sum range? I'm going to sum this right here. Okay, great. So I'm going to add again that to a large number, 999, because in case we have a lot of numbers. So perfect. So that means if I add figure here and I add some kind of a description here, again, apple, it's going to add in. But if I add something here, it's not going to add in, right? Because there's nothing here. So that's exactly what I want. Adding only the numbers if they're values, if there's a value in column K. Perfect. And the tax is going to be equal to, let's just say this times 0.10, let's say 10% tax. And then we can also format these. Let's format these, this and this. Actually, not the payment, but that's okay. Format this. Okay, and the payment's gonna have to be text because we're going to be using that based on a entry. So I'll show you what the reason for that is in a moment. Okay, so we got pay type. That's going to be based on this. Total is going to be equals the sum, obviously, of the subtotal and the tax. Perfect. Okay, great. So we've got that. All right, that looks good. That's just the way I want it. However, this information is going to be dynamic, right? I don't want it to be here. It could be here. It could be here. We don't know where this information is. It's going to be dynamic based on the last row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that. I'm going to place it somewhere other than really where I want. And then we'll use VBA to place it back in. So I'm going to place it right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, based on the total number of items, I'm going to place it dynamically in the row below. This is also going to be placed dynamically too. So we can place it here. So here, basically what all I need to do is say equals the subtotal, equals the total tax, and then equals, right, the total, and then we're just going to paste the values as there. And the paid amount, again equals also. In fact, this one I'm going to do through VBA, but I'll show you that in a minute. And then equals the change. Okay, great. Then all I need to do is copy and paste this based on the last row. All right. So what's next? So next up, what I want to do is I want to start with the VBA. We're almost ready. Everything's looking really good. We have our screen all the way updated. I really appreciate your patience on this. I'll put the picture in here dynamically. Let's get into the VBA and start adding information here so we can get this working and get you a POS that's going to work. All right, into the VBA, developers, Visual Basic. As you know, there's no code. Let's add a module here. So we're going to insert a module, and we'll just call this POS macros using the properties. And we'll just call it POS macros. Any name will do. And the first thing what I really want to do is when a user makes a change to E10, I want to add the information all in here. And I want to add it in the first available line here. So I want to add it in, make it really easy. So let's create a macro and call this add item. So we can get rid of this and we'll go sub add item. All right, and I also want to know the item row. That's really important. So we're going to dimension the item row as long. And I also need to know the available row, which is the first available row. So available row as long as well. Okay, so the first thing I want to make sure is that B5 contains a value, right? We cannot add an item if we don't know the item row. That's really important, right? We can't add the details. I can't add the price, the quantity, and the name if I don't know the row. So if this is a bad information, if it's 455, right, there's no item, this is going to be blank. So we need to make sure that item contains an actual row. So let's go ahead and make sure that we put in a check in VBA. That's the first thing we want to do. We can reduce this a little bit so we can see both screens while we have them up. Okay, so first thing with sheet 1, that's what we're focused on. If dot range B5 equals empty, then exit sub, right? Nothing we can do sub. Okay, so nothing we can do if it's empty. So we can remember. Next up, in case there's any picture here, any previous picture, I want to make sure to delete that. So we need to write some code so we can delete any picture as we're loading new items. If that picture doesn't exist, it's going to create an error. So we want to wrap it in on error resume. Next, dot shapes item pick dot delete, right? We want to delete that, and then on error 0. I use auto hotkey to automatically type. It's a free software, auto hotkey. That's what you'll see me typing really fast. It's automated. Okay, so next up, we're ready to set the item row. We know the item row. That's in B5, don't we? Right, so we can copy this. Just write equals B5 item row. Next up, I need to know the available row. Where are we going to put it? I need to know the first available row. In this case, it's going to be 12. So we can use that using K and XLF plus 1. So we can write that in the code. So the available row is equal to dot range, and then we'll just use K, let's say 999 dot end XLF dot row. That's going to give us our first available row. Okay, good. So now that we have our first available row, we can set the receipt row. I need to know the receipt row. What is the row in B6? I want to put that in B6. I want to know what row. Remember, we added conditional formatting for that, right? So if this changes to 11, I want to know what row that we just added. So we keep that in mind. I want to know the row and put that in B6. So dot range B6 dot value equals, what does it equal? It equals, of course, that variable we just said, sheet 2 D in the item price, available row, set receipt row. Great. So what do I need to know next? Next up, I need to know, I want to put in the item price and the item name. So let's start with the item name. Dot range E3. I want to add in E3 E3 is right here. I want to put in the item name right here. That's going to automate the description because it's based on the formula. So first thing we're going to do is put in the name based on where it is. What is it? It's going to be whatever is in B and the item row. So that's pretty easy. So let's add that in right now. So dot range E, let's put that correctly, E3 dot value equals, right, sheet 2 is where our items are located, sheet 2 range B and the item row, and the item row dot value. Okay, that's the item name, but I also want to add the item price. So the item price is going to go in F6. F6, let's take a look at that right here. I want to put that right there. So that's where the item row is going to be taken care of. So we can add that in right now. Dot range F6, what is that going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to almost the same, but of course a different row. Equals sheet 2, and of course this is going to be D. The D price is located in column D. Description is located in C. Item price, but we don't need the descriptions automated through our formula, so we don't need to add that in. That's automated. I also want to default the item quantity to 1. I want to default the quantity to 1, so we can set that up. Dot range, in this case it would be F8. F8 equals 1, setting the default. You can set yours to anything, but I think 1 will be fine. Default item quantity to 1. All right, so now we've got our default item quantity. Now we're ready to add, let's just put an add item detail to the receipt. Detail to receipt. Okay, great, so we're ready to add. So basically what do I want to do? I want to add the name, the quantity, the price, and the total through a formula. I'm going to put in a formula here. So we can do that with the following lines of code. Dot range, K, of course, that's going to be the item name. K and what? K and the available row, and the available row dot value equals, what is it going to be equaled? E3 dot range E3, because we've already added the name in. E3, because that's going to be our item name. Good to comment everything out. What's next? We can copy and paste this to make it a little bit quicker here. Next up is the quantity, right? So that's located in L, that's column L. We need the equals here, and we need the equals here. Okay, so we've got the equals, and where is our quantity located? That is located in F8. So we're going to change this to F8, and then put in item quantity. Okay, so good. So now we have that. What else do we want? I want the item price. We've got to have the price in there. So that's going to be in M. So we can copy that and change this to M. M is going to be where our price is located, and it's coming from F6, right? Our price is F6, which is right here. We want our price F6, and it's going to go right here in column M. So we can do that. So we're going to call that item price. Next up, what do we want? Well, now I want the actual formula, and that's going to be located in column N. N is going to be where our formula is. So we're going to paste that in, change this, right? We're going to actually going to be quotes equals L, end quotes, and the available row, another and sign, and then quotes, and then I want to use the times because it's multiple times, which is the asterisk, and again, and in this case it's going to be M, right? We want to know the price and M. In fact, we can complete those together. M and the available row. Okay, so we have L times M, right? L, the available row times N. Again, let's just do that here. L and the available row times M and the available row. Perfect. That's exactly the formula that I want to enter. So we have that there. All right, now that we have the formula, let's just put in total price formula. All right, so what's the next step? Next step, I want to check to add the pictures, right? We want to add some pictures in there. Once we select on it, I want that picture to show up. As soon as I select it, I want to show the picture that's whatever the picture is based on this image here. We've got the image here, so I'd like to have a nice picture show up. So how do we do that? Let's write just a little bit more code. First of all, we want to make sure that actually we don't have any issues with the file name. In case it's not found, I just don't want to load the picture. I don't want it to create an error. So we just have to run a check. Let's just use on error resume next, but I'm going to comment that out in case there's an error. On error resume next, but we're commenting it out. We're going to add it in later, so just in case, because it's not good. In case there's an error, I need to know. I know that these are correct, so I don't want any errors to show up. But if there are, if I make a mistake in the code, I want the error to show up now. So keep that in mind. If directory, we want to check for that file path. What is the file path? Sheet2, right? Dot range. What is the range? It's going to be E and what? E and the item row. And the item row. That is the file path of the picture. Dot value VB directory does not equal empty then, right? If it's not empty, it means the file has been found. Then we can continue. So good. So we have that and if. So now we can add the rest of the code in if there's a correct picture. So what is that? Well, first of all, with, right? We're focused on the sheet with dot pictures dot insert. What are we inserting? Of course, we're inserting this right here, this file name right here. Going to insert this. That's what I want to insert. So let's copy that, paste that in there, not the comma. And so then what I want to do is once it's inserted, that will insert it. So what I want to focus on that with dot shape range, because of that shape range, I want to do a few things with it. What do I want to do? Well, the first thing I want to lock the aspect ratio. Lock aspect ratio equals MSO true. Right? I want to make sure that that aspect ratio is locked. I want to set a height for that, and it equals, let's just say around 45, maybe something small like that, 45. And then give it a name. I want a specific name. Name equals item pick, because that way it's always the same name. We can easily delete it. And then end with, perfect. So that's the way we have it. So now we have our shape. We've set the information, but now I want to work with it. What do I want to do? With dot shapes. I want which shape? The one we just added, item pick. With that, I want to do something with it. I want to place it in a specific cell, and I want to make it visible. So dot left. Where do I want to place it? Equals sheet 1. Why we need sheet 1 now? Because we're on with shape. So we need to specify sheet 1. Range. Where do I want to place it? I want to place it. Let's take a look at where we want to place that. Back in here. And we want to place it right about D6. So let's put that D6 inside the code. Range D6 dot left. And then the same thing with dot top. Top, of course, is also going to be D6 but dot top. So let's copy that. Paste it down here and put top. And I want to make it visible. Dot visible equals MSO true. Okay, that looks good. So now we've got end with there. And now we want the end if. So let's, right? Remember, this is the end if that's based on, this is a directory. It's a clear link. So we have that. Perfect. And I also want to do a few more things. Let's go on error 0, right? In case there's, that way, if there was an issue with the link, and let's comment that out for now, but we'll add that back in a little bit later on, just in case there's an error with the picture. So also what I want to do is I want to clear the item ID. I want to get ready. Once they've entered an item, I want to clear this out. I want to get ready for the next item, and I want to put it in. That way they can just scan the item in, and it's automatically ready for the next item. So let's do that. Let's clear it out. Dot range E10 through F10. Remember, it's a merge cell, so we need to clear out both of the cells or all of the cells in that. Dot clear contents, and then clear, put in a note, clear item ID, and I want to make sure it's ready for the next one. So let's select that. Dot range E10. Remember, we only need one cell in a merge cell there. Remember, we only need one cell in a merge cell when we're selecting it. So I want to just select that and get it ready for the next user. All right, so we're done with that. Let's run this code and see if we have any issues. Let's make sure we have a specific ID, and let's run this code. Save it before we run code in case we make a catastrophic mistake. Then we can always just close it out. So we're going to run this And oh, it looks nice. Let's take a look at this apple. Perfect. It put in the price. It's got the price in the quantity, and it's cleared it out, and it put the picture in just as we wanted. Okay, great. So now we've added the item in, and let's just put in, now what I want to do is I want to make this run automatically when the user makes a change to E10. So let's add in that code right now. So when the user makes a change, we want it. That's going to be a change event based on our POS sheet, and it's going to be a worksheet change. So worksheet, not selection change, but change. We'll add some code in selection change shortly. So I want that change to happen when we make a selection. Well, what kind of selection do we want? I want to write on change of item if the row is found. If the row is found, and add item to found and add to receipt. So what do we do? So if not intersection, which one? E10. E10. If the user makes a change to E10, and I want to make sure E10 is not empty, and range E10, I want to make sure that in case they clear it out, that kind of change, I don't want dot value does not equal empty, then what? Then I want to run the macro, add item. If you're not sure what the macro name is, use it in all lowercase, and as soon as it changed to uppercase, we know that it's the right. Watch, did it change? Let's bring this out a little bit. So you see how it changed? Let me show you that again. I put it in all lowercase, add item, but I'm not sure if I got the item name right. So as soon as I hit enter, it moves to all caps, and that means you know you've got the macro right. So add item. So that means as soon as we change it, it's going to add an item. So let's clear that out. Now let's give it a try. So as soon as I add an item 1002, it should work. Perfect. Banana. Okay, great. But you know what? I messed up one thing. Notice how I replaced the line. I wanted the available row must be +1. So let's go back there. Go back to POS, and because I replaced the same row. So look at our available row here. Available row, not the last row, the first available row, +1. That's important. Okay, we got that fixed up. Now 1001, add in an apple, 1002. Perfect. So it sees how it's selecting. And now what I want to do is when I select a specific item, I want a few things to happen. I want to make sure that that information loads up here when I select it. So let's get that. That's on selection change. So why don't we add that code in right now? And that's going to be called load item. So our add item code is working just good, just the way I want it. And let's continue on with another macro called load item. And when do we want that to happen? When we make a selection of a specific receipt. I want to load that item up because this one's working just fine now. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's based on the selection change. So let's go back into the worksheet here, the worksheet code, and focus on our selection change. So what are we going to do? Let's write a comment here on selection of receipt item load item details. If not, what are we going to focus on? K through N, right? K through N, that's our receipt. So let's look at that. K in our first row is K10 through N, let's just large number, 999. I also want to make sure that K actually contains a value, otherwise we can't load anything. And range K and the target row dot value does not equal empty. In that case, I want to load. Then do something. What do I want to do? Then I want to load all the information in. So the first thing I want to do in B6, I want to put the row. Remember, our row must go in B6. That's that highlighted row right here. So I want to put that in B6. So let's do that. That's the first thing we'll do. Range, remember we don't need dot range because we're on the sheet itself. Range B6 dot value equals target row. That's the selected row. Okay, so we've got that. Next up, now that we have that, we're going to set the item load to true. I want to make sure that we're loading the item, so that's going to come in handy a little bit later. So range B4 dot value equals true, and then just going to set that back to false, but we're going to do a few things in the meantime. So let's do that now. It's easy to just copy and paste it. Equals false, and then we'll add some code right in between there. So the first thing we want to do is I want E3 to be the item name. So range E3 dot value equals, what is it? K and the target row. Range K and the target dot row dot value. That's going to be the item name. Okay, so what else? Let's just copy and paste this because we want to add some other details. It's a little bit easier. So I'm going to add in next, I want to add in the item quantity. And next, I want the item price. So we want all that information. Now the quantity is going to go into F8. Quantities are F8, so let's check that. F8. Okay, and then our price, our quantity is going to go in F8 and our price is going to go in F6. We can format that cell there as a price. Okay, so we want that. Let's put that back in now. F8 and then F6 is where our item price is going to go. F6. Good. So we got item price in F6, quantity in F8. All right, so what else do we need to do? I want to set, now we have before. I think that's it. So let's take a look. Let's condense that a little bit so we're good to go. And we can now select on it K. We're going to change this here. We need to know K, L, and M. L, and then M is the price, of course. We don't need the total. So now when we select something, nice, let's change a quantity here just for the fun of it to make sure that that gets loaded up. Hey, I wanted to jump back in here. I've actually already recorded the video, but there's one thing I wanted to add. I just want to show you. When I select an item, I want that picture to show up as well. So not only when we enter an item from here, but also when we select it. So I added some code in after the effect. So I just wanted to let you know what that is all about. So also on selection change, what we did is we set an item. This is a brand new, and of course you can download this, set the item range and found item range. We set those two items. And then what I did is I set the item range to the item name on sheet 2. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look for the found item, looking for the found item. We're going to look for the item name, which is in K, looking for that. If it's found, if not found is nothing. That means if it's found, then we can define the item row as found item row. Then we can define the found item row. And then the rest is the same, just as we added the picture before, no different also in D6. So we already went over that training. I just wanted to jump back in this video so you can see now we have the ability to change the picture on selection. I wanted to add that in because I thought that was really important. Okay, great. Okay, so our quantity goes to 2. We can make this a number actually because it's going to be sometimes 2.5, whatever. All right, so let's save what we have so far. Looking good. Our receipt's coming together. It's coming together really, really nice. I also want to add some additional formatting for total. I want this to be different. So let's highlight all of these cells. Here we can go all the way down to something, a large number. And I want the total to look different. So when we add conditional formatting and manage rules, I'm going to add a brand new rule. And what I'm going to use a formula. And what's that formula? It's going to be based on column M, right? So M, if it's going to be based, that's where our total is going to be located. So M, but it's going to be for every single row in that field. So I want to make sure to get rid of the $ before the 10 equals, what's it going to equal? Total and then the colon. So when that equals total and the colon, what do I want? I want to bold the whole line and maybe put borders around it. So font, I want bold, and then border, I want to add some borders to that. So let's put a solid border above and below that. That'll make the column stand out. Click OK and apply. And we see since it applies to K10, now our total's automatically going to have that. If I change the total row, it's going to automatically change too. Then it's as soon as we remove that total, it's going to be gone. So great, that works good. So because I want that to be dynamic so that our totals automatically. All right, so continuing on, what else do we have to do? We have to have some more code in now. So what I want is if I've selected an item and I change the price here to like 2, I want that price to be reflected here. Or if I change the quantity here, I want that quantity to be reflected in the receipt. It gives users the ability to actually change the quantity in a receipt. So how do we do that? Well, that's based on a change that we make a change to F6 or F8. So let's write some code that we can make those changes. And that's on change event, not selection change, but actually change event. So we're going to scroll up here and write some additional code. On change of price or quantity for the added items, right? For added items. So we can add some if not intersection, what are we going to change? F8 or F6, right? Those are the both F8 or F6 then we want to do something. We want to make sure B4 is not false. We want to make sure that the change that we're making is a manual change, not when the item is loaded. And that happens when B4 is false. And range B4 dot value equals false. And I also want to make sure that B6 contains a value. There has to be a receipt row. And range B6, if we're going to update the receipt row, we need to know what row it is. 6 dot value does not equal empty. So those three conditions have to be true. Then I want to do something. Then what? Then I want to dimension the receipt row as long. Dimension the receipt row as long, because we're going to be using that, and I want to set it up. RECPT row equals B6 equals range B6. Okay, so we're going to set the receipt row because we need to know what row to update. Of course, if we don't have the row, we can't. Receipt row. Once we have the receipt row, we can check which change did the user make. Was it F6 or was it F8? If not, intersection. Let's increase this so you can see that. Bring this a little bit up, bring this a little bit over. If the user made a change to F6, then what do we want to do? Then M, right? Range M, of course, that is our price, right? That's our price. In that case, I want to update M receipt row dot value equals the target value. Update price. All right, next up, we can actually copy this and use it for the quantity, except let me just make a few small changes. Update QTY. So if the user's F8, if they've made a change to F8, then we're going to update the quantity. So F8, M, in fact, in this course, the quantity is located in column L, and we're going to update the quantity. Let's take a look at that now and see if that worked okay. So we're going to update this quantity to 3, and it updated to 3. And now if I want to change the price to 2, it updates to 2. So now you see automatically the price quantity updated. If I want to change the price to 5, it automatically works perfectly. All right, it's kind of expensive bananas, so we don't want to do that. All right, so we've got that. Perfect. So now that's working good. Now let's make these buttons work. What I want to do is I want to actually add in and select, when a user selects these buttons, I want to add in specific, I want to put them in here so that they can actually, instead of scanning items in, maybe they want to enter the buttons using these for a touch screen. So how do we do that? Well, it's actually very easy. I can use one macro for most of these buttons. So let's write that macro now back into the VBA, and let's go into the POS here, and let's go down here and add in another macro here, and we'll call that macro sub enter number button. And so what we can do is we can, since we've named the buttons very specific, it's very easy. So with sheet 1, active cell value, active cell value. Why are we doing active cell? Because we may use this for the quantity, or we may use this for the number, so we can use this for different cells. Equals active cell dot value. And now what do I want? What I really want is this. I want to use the same macro for buttons, but how do I do that? Well, the name of this is button 1, the name of this is button 2, the name of this is button 3 and 4. So I've given these each one a name. So the 5th character is the number. So how do I do that? Well, we can use application caller. It's a really great field. Let me just show you something. Let's just comment this out. I want to show you something using application caller. It's kind of a cool trick. So let's just comment this out. I want to show message box application dot caller. And basically what that is the shape that's actually calling it. So if I take this macro and assign it to a specific button, let me show you what happens. In fact, we can assign it to the group, but I'm going to actually have to change the macros for the last two. Right click, assign macro, and that's going to assign this macro enter number button. Click OK. Now watch when I click that. Button 1. You see how it tells button 1? If I click here, button 2. So button 3. So okay, so we now of course it's not for clear in the period. We're not going to be able, we're going to use some different macros for those two. But it works for 1 through 9, 1 through 0. So great. So we know that, but I don't want, right? I don't want to enter the entire name. I only want to enter the last character, right? All I really want is 1. all I really want is 6. So how do we get rid of that? We can use right to get rid of the first 4 characters. So we can do that. Let's go back in here. Let's get rid of this. Now you understand that. Get rid of that. Active cell value equals the active cell value in case whatever's there, we want to add to it, and right of what? The application dot caller comma 1. I only want the rightmost character, and I want to put that in the active cell. So if this is the active cell, now I click 1, 2, 3, 4. See how it works? It's really, really great. So what if I want to clear that out and I want to enter 1, 0, 0, 1? Perfect. It worked good. 1, 0, 0, 2. You see how easy that was? One single macro. I'll change it for this and the decimal, but it worked great to add in items. That's just perfect. Don't worry about these subtotals. We're going to add those in dynamically when we click print. All right, it's going to be long training. I hope you're liking this. I know my trainings are long, but they are very, very comprehensive, and I want to make sure that to give you all the tools to make your own amazing applications. Okay, so we understand that. Now what we need to do is write little macros for the clear and the dot. So let's write those right now. We've got the enter. See how easy that is with one very, very simple macro. Enter, let's do that enter decimal button. And we also want to enter the clear item button. So sub clear item button. This one's a little bit different with sheet 1. So if the active cell, I want to double check to make sure that the active cell is E10. If active cell dot address, right? We're focused not at comment. Dot address is equal to E10. E10. Then what do I want to do? Then I want to clear, because it's a merge cell, we must clear them all. Range dot range E10 through F10, because I need to clear, remember we need to clear all both those. Dot value clear contents. Okay, great. So what if it's not? Else, because that's, then in this case we can just do active cell dot clear contents. Okay, great. So what that's going to do is that's going to clear the contents based on whatever cell we've selected. And if it's a merge cell, if that's that E10, I want to make sure that we do that, because this will create an error if we try to clear the contents of a single cell when it's a merge cell. So now let's see, we put in this and let's assign the macro, right click. I'm going to scroll up so you can see it. Right click, assign the macro, clear item button. Okay, so what I want to do is when I run this, I want to clear whatever we have. So let's click on the specific item, clear it. Okay, it works just perfect. 7, 8, 9, clear. Great. 1, 0, 0, 4. It's going to enter the item. Perfect. Clear. All right, great. So that's working, but I want to enter the decimal. Maybe you want to enter decimal. When we enter quantity, I also want to be able to add to that clear. It also works for that too. But what if I want to enter a decimal? I want to make sure we do that. So let's enter a button for that. Obviously it's not. And let's create a macro just for that. Okay, so this is actually going to be a text field because we're going to enter the decimal. And then what we want to do, we want to make sure if we're entering a decimal, it really only works in text fields. So let's add quantity goes to text. Okay, so next up, what do we want to do? In there, I want to create a macro, and we're going to call this enter decimal button. Sub, make this a little bit bigger so you can see what's going on. Enter decimal button, and this is going to be pretty easy. It's going to be the active cell dot value equals whatever's there already, active cell dot value and the decimal and the decimal. That's it. Pretty very simple, very, very simple. And the sub, very, very simple. So let's assign that macro now. Right click the individual. Remember, this is a group shape, so we need to right click, and then I'm gonna assign the macro to that, and that's going to be enter decimal. Okay, good. So now when we enter, let's say we want to enter the quantity, 2.5. Perfect. Okay, and you see now it shows automatically grapes 2.5. We can clear that out and change it to 5.5, and it automatically changes here. Perfect. So now we have that, and we want to enter. So we're getting closer to the end. So thanks for your patience on this. We just have a few more macros to write. I want to print and enter, so we've got the add item. Good. All right, so what I want to also do, I want to print this receipt, and then I want to save it so we can, and I also want to add these payments. So how can we do that? The payments are really cool. All we need to do is use the, again, application caller ID and change it here, the pay type. So let's look at that. How do we do that? Very simple. And that's just with one more macro, sub enter payment cell. And how does that? Sheet 1 dot range I7, that's our payment cell, right? I7, let's double check that. Dot select, because I want to enter the payment, right? When user wants to enter payment, right? If they click payment, all we need to do is select this cell. That's all we need to do. So clicking this is, let's just do that, enter payment dot select. So I'm going to copy this. That's all I want to do is enter the payment for that point so that we can get ready for the payment. Assign macro, I'm just, sorry, it's off the screen. Right click, assign macro, enter payment cell. All I want to do with this one is just select the payment cell. Then I want to add in the payment buttons here. So that's pretty easy. How do we do that? Well, that's just the enter the pay type. Let's take a look at that. We're going to also use application caller on that. We can do that because remember, we've named these specifically, check, we've named these specifically, not the group, but the individual shapes, card, and so on and so forth. So let's go into that. So we can do that, enter sub, enter pay type. And in this case, sheet 1 dot range I6 is the I6 dot value equals application dot caller pay type. Simple as that. That's all we need to do. So when we click, hold down in the controls, click assign macro, and there we go, enter pay type. So now we have pay type, cash, card. You see how that works? Because we know the name, it automatically takes the name and enters them. But when we're ready to enter a payment, now we can enter the payment just by clicking these buttons. 1 and 20 are clearing. You see, so we can enter the payment now easily. Put the check, and I also want to click the payments automatically, so we're ready to select the payment automatically. So let's do that. Once we do that, enter the pay type, I want to make sure that we're selecting the payment. So after they enter the pay type, I want to select the payment cell automatically. After they enter the payment, I want to select the payment automatically so they can quickly enter the payment. So we do that with just one line of code. Sheet 1 dot range I7 select. I7 dot select. Okay, enter payment cell. That way they can enter it with the buttons. Perfect. Great. So now they put on the payment, then they click the payment, enter the payment, and then just click 36 or whatever they want to pay. Great. So we need to change. What is that? Equal to the payment minus the total. Now we've got the change. And of course I want to format that currency, the payment, same thing. We're going to leave the payment there because watch what happens. If I enter the $sign here, if I enter that formatting, accounting, it's going to not enter the decimal properly. See that? So we'll keep that as text. It's okay for now. We're going to keep that as text. Okay, and then we can clear it out easily, and we can enter the proper 30. Let's say they pay 30.89. Perfect. $2 is our change. We can justify that. I like that the way it is. All right, great. So now we're ready to print the receipt. So let's save the work we've done and run a macro. And all I want to do to print a receipt is basically determine the last row, add in the subtotal. So I'm going to delete that. What I want to do then is I want to copy these subtotals, copy them, I take the payment amount, put it here, copy them, and then paste it right here. And then actually going to paste it right here. And we're going to do that inside the code, paste it there. And I also just want to add up. There's one more thing. Actually, I want to add a dotted line for the total. And I want to do that dynamically through conditional formatting. So let's do that. I'm going to highlight, actually I'll start here because it's not going to be, highlight all the cells here, all the potential cells, add in conditional formatting, a new rule using a formula. And what is the formula? It's going to be based on this. So based on actually the first possible, which would be M10. M10, again, we're going to remove the $sign and then equals, what's going to equal? Subtotal total colon. So if it equals that, what do I want to do? I want to put a dotted line at the top. Format this dotted line at the top. Click OK. Perfect. Now I've got a nice subtotal and a total. Perfect. That's exactly the way I want. So as the subtotal changes, we're going to place this dynamically. So let's get ready to print it. Actually, we want to, before we want the date, always want that equals. Now I want to put the date in there. That's good. We got the date now. We got everything. We got the ready to put it in. So let's save that again. And we'll go back into the VBA and create a macro called print. Okay, so let's see, sub print receipt. Okay, we're going to dimension. We need the last row of the sheet. Dimension the last item row. That's very as long. We need to know the last item row so we can place the total and all of that sheet. With sheet 1, first of all, we want to make sure it's I7 less than. We want to make sure that they've paid, right? We can't give them a receipt unless they've paid. How do I make sure? I want to make sure that I7 is greater than or equal to the total. Make sure that they have, because if they haven't paid yet, I don't want to print the receipt. Kind of nice. Okay, so if dot range I7 is less than what? Then I5, then dot range I5, then message box, please enter a payment at or above the total. At or above the total. All right, exit sub. Make sure that they've paid the bill before we can print a receipt, right? We can't have them getting away for free. Can't steal it. Dot range. What do we want? S6 value. We want to enter the payment amount. Again, because it's a text, because this is a text, and because I don't want this as a text, I want this actually as a currency. And this is, let's change all these to currencies. Although it's not going to matter because it's formatted, I'm only going to paste. So we want those as currencies. And so this is not a text because this is a text because that text only works with decimals in this case. So we just want to copy this value and bring it over to here. So S6 is equal to I7. We're going to write that in right now. S6 dot value equals dot range I7 value. I7 value. And what that's going to do is that's going to enter the payment amount. Enter the payment amount. Okay, great. Now I want to set the last item row, and that's going to be based on K. Last item row equal to dot range K, right? K is our item, 9999, dot value, that's a lot of nines, dot end, XL up, dot row. That's going to be our last item row. That's what I want. If the last item row is less than 10, right? Less than 10, then exit the sub. That means there's no items, nothing to print. Exit sub. Just want to put that in, that caveat in there. All right, great. So we're now ready to go. I want to clear B6. I want to clear the selected row. I don't want this highlighted row. I don't want that to print, right? Because it shouldn't print. It should just print as a normal receipt. The best way to do that is just to clear B6. So when we delete that, it's going to delete the conditional formatting. So we can do that. B6 should be cleared. Dot range B6 dot clear contents. Dot clear contents. Okay, and that's going to clear selected receipt row. Okay, good. So that's kind of important. We don't want that to show up on the receipt. Remember that footer copy? Remember that range? Okay, let's set the range actually. I want to set this as a range so that we can easily work with it. So I'm going to highlight all the cells and just click here and put in footer range. We also want to move this over, and I also want to display this. Normally this is going to be hidden. Footer group we want to display, and we want to display it based on where do I want to display it? Well, let's take a look here. Where do we want to display it? So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this over. We're going to copy it over right about right here. Paste the values in there. So it's going to be right here. So where do I want to place this? I want to place it about right there. I want to place it. So if our last row is 16, where do I want to place it? I want to place it about 7 or 8 rows down, I would think. About 7 rows down from the last row. That's where I want to place this group here. Okay, so we can do that. So we know where we're going to place it now. Based on the last row, 7 rows down. Okay, great. So we've got that. So let's do that. Let's write that code now. First of all, we want that range that we just created. We're going to copy that. That's this range right here. I want to copy that, the footer range. Let's do that right now. And since we've specified it as a range, we can do just that. So dot range, footer range, and then copy that. Dot copy. Where are we going to place it? I'm going to place it in the last row plus 1. So we can do that. Dot range M, that's M, and where? And the last item row plus 1, right? 1 below the last row. I'm going to paste that in there. Dot paste special. I just want to paste the values because we already have everything else formatted. Paste special, and then XL paste values. Just to paste the values. Paste values only because everything else is already formatted, which is fine. We don't want to mess up. And then application dot cut copy mode equals false. That's going to get rid of the dancing ants. Okay, so next up I'm ready with the footer group. So with dot shapes, what shape is called footer group? Remember that with the barcode footer group in our message? Well, I want to work with that. Dot left, I want to place that somewhere. Dot left, where do I want to place it? Equals sheet 1. We need to specify the sheet because we're focused on dot shape. Sheet 1 range K, and the last item row plus 7. Remember, we want to go 7 down. That's about what we want. Plus 7 dot left. I'm going to do the same thing for the top. So we can copy this portion right here and then just go 1 down and do the same thing with top. Dot top equals sheet 1 and then dot top. That's going to place it. And let's take a look. Then I want to make it visible. Dot visible equals MS true. So we got to make it visible. Good, good, good. All right. So next up, now we're ready to print it. We want to set the print area because the print area is going to be dynamic. So I want to start it out in K1 and go all the way down to at least here, right? Or maybe here, right? 1 row below. But how do we know the last row? Well, we know the last row is 16, but I want to go all the way down. And I want to add in maybe 10 or 11 rows. Probably 10 or 11 rows here. So we can do, let's say 11 rows. So 11 rows, I'm going to set the print range. So it's going to start out in K1. It's going to go all the way down to the last item plus 11 to N. So let's set that print range right now. So we can do that. Dot page setup, right? We're setting up the page. Dot print area. What is the print area? It's going to equal to K1. We know that's our starting range. K1 through N. N and what? And the last item row plus 11. That's going to be enough. Next up, we're ready to print out. Dot print out. What do we want to print out? I want to print out from to. That's important. Noted copies. You can keep that as default. Preview active printer. Let's set that to true. The active printer. Print to file no. Collate no. Print to file name no. Ignore print areas and let's put that as false. Okay, that's going to print it out, and then I want to get ready for the next order. Once we print it out, I want to select E10. I just want to get ready for the next order, but I also want to click the next. So let's select E10 just to make sure. Dot range E10 dot select. Okay, great. So we've got E10. That looks about right. Let's run that and let's assign it to the button and see if we have any code. Save it. Always want to save after writing code. Let's assign that. That's the print here. So we're going to click on the group here, scroll up so you can see it. Right click, assign macro, and then print receipt. Okay, let's take a look. My default printer, let's see if we have any issues. Print. Looks like it's printing out and it's going to print to my Snagit editor. Wow, that looks really good. Let's take a look at that, zoom out. That looks good. That's the way it looks like this. I want to move it over a little bit, but I think everything looks just the way I wanted to see it. We need to do some formatting on here. That doesn't look quite right. So let's format these. I want to make sure everything's formatted correctly. Formatting, make sure we hit the currency so everything's formatted the same. That looks good. Our subtotal looks good. Our dotted line we have. Very nice. All right, great. It looks like we're doing good, making a lot of progress. One more macro to write. What I want to do is I want to take all this information and I want to save it to the sales. I want to save it here so we have it saved so we can use reports and run our sales reports because I want to save all that information. So let's write that macro right now. Everything looks Very good. We're making good progress. So the last macro would be to save it and clear it. So this button would be next. I want to clear all, save it to the database, and then clear it all and get ready for the next item. So let's see, how do we do that? We're going to start writing some macros. Let's go down here. We're going to keep everything on the same module this time. Sub, we'll call it save and clear. Thanks for sticking with me on this extremely long training. I want to give you tons and tons of value. If you like these workbooks, I love your support, whether you're joining the courses or purchasing workbooks. I really, really appreciate it. That keeps these trainings free each and every week. Last item row, and also the first database row. Where am I going to put that? In the first database row as long. I need to know that. And also the total rows as long. We need to know how many total rows. So that's very, very important. Okay, so now that we got the total rows, let's get the last item row with sheet 1. We're focused on sheet 1 primarily. The last item row, remember, is K. We know that already. So we already did that up here. Why don't we just copy that here? It's going to be the same thing. We need to know the last item, and then we can paste it right down here. No difference on that. Last item row, same variable, same everything. Total rows is going to be equal to the last item row minus 9. Our row starts in 10, so we're going to subtract 9. Total items. I want to know the total items. That's very important. So I want to know how many items to add to this database. So we're going to start the last one. In this case, its total is 7. So all we need to do is the last item row 16 minus 9 is going to get us 7. So we need to know the total items to add to our database. All right, so we have that. So we've got the total items. Next up, I want to know the first available database row. I want to know what's the first row that we're going to add to here. In this case, it's 3, but I need to know the first available row, so we don't want to copy over any other information. So we're going to get our first database row is going to be equal to, and it's going to be sheet 3. Sheet 3 is our sales. Sheet 3 dot range A, and then we'll just use a large number, 9999 dot end XLUP dot row. Nice. Okay, so we have our plus 1. Our last row of data plus 1 is going to be our first available row. First available row. Okay, great. So we have our first available database row. Now we're getting ready to copy over the information. So sheet 3, starting in A, right? What do I want to put in A? Let's add our invoice. Before we add our items, I want to add our invoice. I want to add in our receipt number, our date, and our cashier. I want to add all of that information in. Receipt number, date, and cashier. That's going to come from here. Receipt number, date, and cashier. So it's going to come from M5, M6, and M7. So we can add that in. I want to add it in for every single row. Every single row of our receipt. So if there's 7 rows here, I want to add it in all 7 here, all 7 here, and all 7 here. It's going to be the same information, receipt, date. So we can do that with just a few lines of code. Sheet 3 dot range. What is the range? It's going to start out in A, of course, and the first database row, the one that we just defined, DB, same thing, okay, all the way through A, and what? Colon A, and the first database row plus the total rows, and the first database row plus the total rows. We also have to subtract 1. Total rows minus 1, because we can't count the existing row. Okay, total rows minus 1, and that is going to be our setup. So we can set that up. Dot value equals, what does it equal? It equals dot range. It's going to be our dot range L5. That's our receipt number, L5. Let's take a look at that and make sure we have our receipt numbers. What I want to add in there? M5. M5 is where our receipt's located, so I want to put that in there. M5, M6, M7. So I want to make sure we put all that information in. Okay, so M5 is where we want to put that. That's our receipt number. And we can copy and paste this, and we're just going to add in the rest. Of course, we're going to be column B, column C, receipt number, column B. What's B? B is going to, of course, be our date. So we want to add that in. B is going to be M6. M6 is our date, order, date, and then our cashier, of course, cashier is going to go into C. So put C for our cashier, and our cashier comes from M7. Let's just double check that. So we know everything is correct. Our receipt number is M5, our date is M6, and our cashier is M7. Great. Now that we have all of that in there, we are ready to add in all of our items here. So we can do that with just a little bit of code. So let's do that now. So in this case, it's going to start out in D. D is going to be the first, right? D is going to take on our item, and all the way to G is going to be a total. So it's D through G. We can just copy that straight out. D through G is going to be equal to what? Equal to dot range K10, starting at K. K10 is our first. K10 through N, and the last item row, and the last item row dot value, and that's going to be all item detail. All right, let's double check that. K through N is going to be equal K through N. All that information, all the way to from starting from K10 all the way to the last row. Taking all that information and bring it right into here. All right, good. So we've got that covered. Let's take a look. Let's finish up our thing and get ready for the next order so we can do that. So bring it down, add a few lines here, and what is next in our code. Next up, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we're going to hide our footer group. We don't need our footer group anymore. That's the receipt number. We can hide that. No need to do that. Dot shapes, footer group. When we're getting ready for the next order, dot visible equals MSO false. Right? Let's hide footer group shape. Don't need that anymore. And then also I want to delete the item picture. Right? If there's an item picture here, I want to delete that. We don't need to show that anymore. We need to clear the contents, delete the picture. But if there's no picture, it could create an error. So let's wrap that on air zoom next. Dot shapes, item pick, dot delete, and then on air grow. Okay, so now we've got the picture, and now I want to clear the contents. I want to clear all of the receipt. We want to clear that starting at K and going all the way down. Just clear everything out. We can delete everything, getting it ready for the next order. So dot range K10 through N. Remember, because we're adding in the formulas dynamically through VBA, we can delete them anyways. 999. Okay, dot clear contents. Not clear, because that would clear the formats, just clear contents. And then what I want to do is I want to calculate it, dot calculate it. And what do I want to do to calculate it? I want to make sure that new receipt number gets generated. Our new receipt number is based on a few things. It's based on the maximum of the receipt numbers, and it's based on this formula right here. So I want to make sure the next receipt number gets calculated. Once it's calculated, I want to put the next receipt number right here into M5. So we can do that with the following lines of code. Dot range M5 dot value equals dot range B7, and that is going to be our new receipt number. New receipt, or next receipt number, next receipt number. Getting ready for the next. All right, now I want to clear out several fields. What I want to clear out, I want to clear out basically certain fields for the previous row. Dot range, I want to clear out B6. That's going to be our item row in case that has a value. E3 through F3. What is that? Well, that I want to make sure that our item number, I want to clear this out. And I want to clear out our item name, and I want to clear out that. It's getting ready for the next. So E3 through F3. F6, quantity, price. I want to make sure F8 is cleared out. And I want to clear out I7. So basically I want to clear out all this information, the payment type, the payment amount, payment type. I guess we can keep I6 there in case it's the same payment type, in case they're always using cash or something. All right, so we cleared that out. So now we cleared everything out. Let's finish up that line of code. Dot I7, dot clear contents, clear item fields. Okay, so I want to select E10, dot range E10, getting it ready for the next E10 dot select. That's the order. Nice. Okay, so let's clear that up, check it out for any errors, save before we actually run this code. That's always a good idea. Save it and assign this macro. It's called save and clear. So we can copy this and then enter that right here. This is the button I want to assign it to. Right click, actually I'll right click the entire group, assign the macro, sorry it's off the screen, save and clear, and click OK. Now that we've printed it, all right, let's bring this up here and click next and see what happens. Variable not defined, total rows. We need to make sure that this is total rows. Okay. All right, that worked good. Now we've cleared it out. Perfect. And ready, this, we want to add an if error. We don't want to have this there. Okay, if error, wrap that in if error, comma, double quotes, because I don't want to show it like NA. All right, that looks good. Now after it's been selected, and let's take a look at our sales here, increase the date. That looks good. The quantity, everything got saved. So our next one should be 1001. 1001 is the right one. That's exactly the way we want it. Perfect. So select in here, add another one. You can use the buttons, or of course we can also type in 1. Perfect. 1007. Nice. We're adding these in. 1002. Perfect. Or we can type it in 1002. Good. And we can also select something, change the quantity. Nice. Change the price. And of course we can change the price also with we can change the price any which way we want. Set a payment and set a payment amount. And we can set it to $20. Okay, good. And we've got that. And now we can print our receipt. Print it, adding the subtotal. Perfect. It prints it out nicely. Good. And now we can click next. Awesome. Great. Now we've created a brand new point of sale. It's a really, really great program. I'm glad I got to show this to you. Thanks for sticking with me on this extra long training. Thank you so much. Of course, if you do like this video, make sure you subscribe. And I can't wait. And we will see you next week. Thanks so much. Have a great week.